The signal arrived on a Tuesday morning, cutting through the cosmic static like a blade through silk. Dr. Sarah Chen was 3 hours into her shift at the Deep Space Communication Array when the computer's alert chime made her coffee cup slip from her fingers. The ceramic shattered against the floor, but she barely noticed. Her eyes were locked on the screen displaying something that should have been impossible. The transmission was structured, deliberate, and desperate. It came from a sector of space that human instruments had marked as empty for over 2 centuries. The message itself was a masterwork of universal mathematics and basic physics concepts, designed to be understood by any species that had achieved interstellar communication. But it was the emotional undertone that made Sarah's hands shake as she reached for the emergency contact button. "This is Dr. Chen at Array Station 7. I need Director Morrison on the line immediately. We have a first contact scenario." Within 6 hours, the sterile walls of the array station were crowded with officials from Earth's Defense Council, xenobiologists, linguists, and military advisors. The message had been decoded, translated, and analyzed by the most advanced AI systems humanity possessed. The result was sobering. The Kythera Collective, a peaceful alliance of 7 different species, was under attack. Their homeworlds were burning under the assault of something they called the Void Swarm. The enemy was described as a hive-minded species that consumed entire planets, leaving nothing but empty husks drifting in space. The collective had fought for 3 years, but their pacifist nature had left them unprepared for total war. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood before the assembled crowd, his weathered face grim as he read from the translated message. "They've lost 4 of their 7 worlds. Their population has dropped from 12 billion to just over 2 billion. They estimate they have perhaps 6 months before complete extinction." The silence in the room was deafening. Dr. Chen found herself thinking about the mathematics involved. 12 billion sentient beings, reduced to 2 billion in 3 years. The scale of the genocide was beyond human experience, even considering humanity's own bloody history. "They're asking for help," Admiral Rodriguez continued. "Specifically, they're asking for military assistance. They've detected our radio emissions and have concluded that humanity might possess the aggressive tendencies necessary to fight this enemy." Director Morrison stepped forward, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. "What do we know about human military capabilities compared to this collective?" Dr. James Wright, the lead xenobiologist, cleared his throat. "Based on the technological descriptions in their message, the Kythera Collective is approximately 50 years ahead of us in most fields. Their energy systems, propulsion technology, and manufacturing capabilities far exceed our own. However," he paused, consulting his tablet, "their weapons technology appears to be almost primitive. They describe their most powerful warships as having deterrent capabilities and defensive screens. There's no mention of offensive weaponry beyond what we would consider mining equipment." Admiral Rodriguez felt a cold smile cross his face. "They're asking the right species for help." The debate that followed lasted 18 hours. Some argued that humanity wasn't ready for interstellar conflict. Others pointed out that if this void swarm was as dangerous as described, they would eventually reach Earth anyway. But it was Professor Elena Vasquez, head of the Military History Department at the Global University, who spoke the words that decided humanity's course. "Gentlemen, ladies, we are being asked to do what humans have done better than any other species in our planet's history. We are being asked to fight a war. Not a war for territory, not a war for resources, but a war for the right of sentient life to exist in this galaxy. This is exactly what our species was built for." The vote was unanimous. Humanity would answer the call. The next 72 hours saw activity on a scale not witnessed since the Third World War. Production facilities across Earth and the lunar colonies shifted into wartime mode. The Mars shipyards, which had been leisurely constructing colony transports, began retrofitting every available vessel for combat. Captain Lisa Zhang stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching as her crew ran final system checks. The Retribution had been a deep space exploration vessel just 4 days ago. Now she bristled with rail cannons, missile pods, and the new plasma lance technology that had been rushed through development. Her cargo bays were filled with marine units and their equipment. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving final roster updates from Fleet Command." Zhang pulled up the tactical display and felt her breath catch. The scope of humanity's response was staggering. Every nation on Earth had contributed ships, personnel, and resources. The first wave alone consisted of over 200 vessels, from massive dreadnoughts to nimble corvettes. Behind them, production lines were already working on Wave 2, but it was the personnel manifests that truly showed humanity's character. Every ship carried volunteers. Scientists who had never held weapons were training as gunners. Farmers were learning to operate mining equipment repurposed for combat. Children barely out of school were manning communication stations. "How long until we reach the Kythera system?" Zhang asked her navigator. 37 days at maximum burn, Captain." Zhang nodded grimly. According to the last transmission from the collective, they had perhaps 4 months left. Humanity would arrive with weeks to spare, if they were lucky. The departure ceremony was broadcast across Earth and the colonies. Billions watched as the largest fleet in human history began its journey into the unknown. Religious leaders offered prayers in dozens of languages. World leaders gave speeches about duty and courage. But it was the message from Maria Santos, a 90-year-old woman whose grandson was aboard the flagship, that captured the moment best. "My grandson asked me what he should do if he gets scared out there," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "I told him to remember that he's human. We don't abandon people who need help. We don't run from bullies. And we sure don't let anyone wipe out entire species on our watch." As the fleet disappeared into the dark between stars, Dr. Chen remained at her post, monitoring the communication channels. The Kythera Collective had been informed that help was coming. Their response had been a mixture of hope and disbelief. "They keep asking if we're sure," she reported to Director Morrison. "They can't seem to understand why a species they've never met would risk everything to help them." Morrison looked out at the stars through the observation deck's massive windows. "They'll understand soon enough. They're about to learn what happens when someone threatens innocent people in a galaxy where humans exist." Meanwhile, aboard the UES Retribution, Captain Zhang was reviewing intelligence reports about the Void Swarm. The enemy was described as insectoid, operating with perfect coordination and showing no capacity for communication or negotiation. They simply consumed everything in their path. "Captain," her tactical officer interrupted her reading, "I've been analyzing the collective's combat reports. I think I understand why they've been losing." Zhang looked up. "Enlighten me." "They're fighting a defensive war. Every engagement they describe involves them trying to protect something. They've never once mentioned taking the fight to the enemy. They're reacting instead of acting." Zhang felt that familiar predatory smile that had earned her the nickname, the Sharkback at the Naval Academy. Well, they called the right species. Humans wrote the book on taking the fight to the enemy. The fleet continued its journey through space, carrying with it the hopes of 2 civilizations and the fury of humanity awakened to righteous war. Behind them, Earth's factories continued their work, and recruitment centers saw lines stretching for miles as humanity prepared for its first interstellar conflict. The message from the Kythera Collective had changed everything. For the first time in human history, the species' talent for warfare would be used not for conquest or resources, but for something greater. They were going to save an entire civilization, and in doing so, they would announce to the galaxy that Earth's children had arrived, and they were not to be trifled with. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kythera system with all the subtlety of a meteor strike. "Warning," klaxons screamed across collective monitoring stations as 200 unknown vessels appeared on their sensors, moving at attack speeds toward the inner system. Ambassador Zethkar of the Aquatic Council was the first to realize what they were seeing. His tentacles trembled as he activated the communication array from his command vessel, the Peaceful Current. "Unknown Fleet. This is Ambassador Zethkar of the Kythera Collective. Please identify yourselves." The response came in perfect collective standard, though the voice carried an accent unlike anything in their databases. "Ambassador, This is Admiral Marcus Rodriguez of the Human Defense Fleet. We received your message. We're here to help. The silence that followed lasted nearly 30 seconds. When Zethkar finally responded, his voice carried a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. Admiral Rodriguez, we did not expect such a rapid response. Or such a large force. We don't do anything halfway, Ambassador. What's the current tactical situation? Captain Zhang, monitoring the communication from the Retribution's bridge, felt a chill as she reviewed the sensor data streaming in from the system. 3 of the collective's worlds were completely dark, no energy signatures at all. The 4th world, Kythera Prime, was surrounded by a massive debris field that had once been a defensive fleet. Only the 5th world, Sanctuary, showed signs of significant activity. Admiral, Zethkar's voice carried across the channel. The Void Swarm has consolidated their forces around Sanctuary. Our remaining population, approximately 1.8 billion souls, has been evacuated there. We estimate the enemy force at roughly 12,000 vessels of various sizes. Admiral Rodriguez studied the tactical display on his flagship, the UES Vengeance. 12,000 ships seemed overwhelming until he noticed the power readings. Ambassador? What are the typical armament specifications for swarm vessels? They employ primarily kinetic weapons and some form of energy-draining technology. Their largest ships measure approximately 800 meters in length. Rodriguez exchanged glances with his tactical officer, Commander Sarah Park. Ambassador, our largest ship is 2,000 meters long, and we brought 12 of them. I think we might surprise this swarm. What Zethkar couldn't know was that humanity had spent the journey time well. Intelligence analysts had pored over every scrap of data the collective had provided. The Void Swarm's tactics were predictable, focused entirely on overwhelming their enemies through numbers and consumption. They showed no evidence of strategic thinking beyond basic hive coordination. Fleet, this is Admiral Rodriguez, the human commander's voice carried across all channels. Intelligence indicates the enemy has never faced a technologically equivalent force using human tactical doctrine. They're clustered around Sanctuary like they're besieging a medieval castle. They've left their flanks completely open. Captain Zhang felt her pulse quicken as the tactical plan unfolded. The human fleet would split into 3 groups. The first, led by Rodriguez himself, would conduct a direct assault on the swarm's center to draw their attention. The second group would swing wide around the system's asteroid belt and strike from behind. The third group, including the Retribution, would use the cover of Sanctuary's moon to launch a close-range assault on the swarm's largest vessels. Remember, Rodriguez concluded his briefing. These things have been terrorizing peaceful species for who knows how long. They've never faced humans before. Let's show them what a mistake that was. The battle began 18 hours later. The collective's remaining vessels, mostly damaged ships and converted civilian craft, watched in amazement as the human fleet implemented tactics beyond their comprehension. The lead group of human ships approached the swarm formation at attack speed, their weapons systems charging. The first exchange was devastating, but not in the way the collective expected. The swarm vessels opened fire with their kinetic weapons, sending clouds of projectiles toward the approaching humans. The human ships didn't even attempt to dodge. Instead, their point defense systems came online, creating walls of laser fire that vaporized incoming projectiles like raindrops in a furnace. When the humans returned fire, the difference in military philosophy became brutally apparent. Kythera technology was advanced, but it had been designed by species that viewed violence as a last resort. Human technology had been designed by a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing. Rail cannons punched through swarm hulls like paper. Plasma lances carved apart enemy formations. Missile swarms, each projectile guided by AI systems originally designed for asteroid mining, found their targets with surgical precision. Aboard the peaceful Current, Zethkar watched his sensors in stunned silence. The humans weren't just fighting the swarm, they were systematically dismantling them. How are they maintaining such accuracy while moving at those speeds? He asked his tactical officer. Sir, I don't think they're moving at attack speed, came the reply. I think that is their attack speed. The second phase of the battle began as the flanking group emerged from behind the asteroid belt. The swarm, focused on the frontal assault, never saw them coming. Admiral Lisa Chen, commanding the flanking force from the UES Indomitable, allowed herself a moment of satisfaction as her ships opened fire on the enemy's rear formations. "Target their largest vessels first," she ordered. "Let's cut the head off this snake." The swarm's response was exactly what human tacticians had predicted. The hive mind redirected forces to counter the new threat, weakening their center. It was a mistake no human commander would have made, but the swarm had never faced an enemy that thought in 3 dimensions. Captain Zhang's moment came as her group rounded Sanctuary's moon. The Retribution and her escorts found themselves facing the swarm's command vessels, massive 800-meter ships that served as coordination nodes for the hive mind. "All ships, target the bio-neural clusters intelligence identified," Zhang ordered. "These things coordinate through biological connections. Sever enough connections, and we turn 12,000 ships into 12,000 individual targets." The close-range engagement was brutal and brief. Human ships, designed with the hard lessons of Earth's naval history, proved devastatingly effective at point-blank range. The Retribution's main plasma lance, originally designed to cut through asteroid fields, carved through 3 swarm command ships in a single pass. The effect on the swarm was immediate and catastrophic. Ships that had moved in perfect coordination began to scatter, their hive connections severed. Some continued fighting, but many simply stopped, floating dead in space as their biological control systems failed. It was then that the humans demonstrated another concept alien to the collective's experience: mercy in victory. Instead of pursuing the scattered swarm ships, Admiral Rodriguez ordered the fleet to form defensive positions around Sanctuary. "Ambassador Zethkar," Rodriguez's voice carried across the communication channels. "This is Admiral Rodriguez. The immediate threat to Sanctuary has been neutralized. Do you have any wounded among your people who need immediate assistance?" The question stunned the collective leadership. In their experience, military engagements ended with exhausted victors trying to recover from their losses. The humans had just destroyed a force 10 times their size and were asking about helping the survivors. "Admiral," Zethkar replied, his voice thick with emotion, "we have approximately 200,000 injured aboard our medical vessels. Our medical technology is advanced, but our supplies are nearly exhausted." "Copy that, Ambassador. We'll have medical teams aboard your ships within the hour." What followed challenged every assumption the collective had made about military species. Human medics, many of them combat veterans, worked alongside collective doctors with a dedication that brought tears to alien eyes. Human engineers, trained in the brutal efficiency of military logistics, helped repair damaged collective vessels with an expertise that bordered on miraculous. But it was a conversation between Admiral Rodriguez and Zethkar that truly revealed the nature of humanity's involvement. "Admiral," the ambassador said as they toured a human medical bay where injured collective civilians were receiving treatment, "I must ask why your species responded to our call. You risked everything for people you had never met." Rodriguez paused beside a bed where a young collective engineer was recovering from plasma burns. A human medic was adjusting the alien's treatment with the same care she would show her own family. "Ambassador, there's something you need to understand about humans," Rodriguez said quietly. "We're not a perfect species. We've made mistakes, fought wars, done things we're not proud of. But there's one thing we've never been able to tolerate, and that's bullies. When someone picks on people who can't defend themselves, humans get involved. It's just who we are." The ambassador looked around the medical bay, seeing humans and aliens working together with a cooperation that spoke of shared purpose rather than mere alliance. And now? Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Now we make sure the swarm understands they picked the wrong galaxy to terrorize. Because humans are here now. And we're not going anywhere." Outside the medical bay, the human fleet maintained its protective formation around Sanctuary. But aboard every ship, crews were already preparing for the next phase of operations. The collective had been saved, but the swarm still existed, and as Admiral Rodriguez had made clear, Humanity was far from finished with this fight. In the depths of space, automated probes launched from human ships began tracking the scattered swarm vessels. The chase was about to begin, and for the first time in galactic history, the swarm was about to learn what it meant to be hunted. 3 weeks after the Battle of Sanctuary, the human fleet had transformed from a rescue mission into something the galaxy had never seen before. A hunter-killer group dedicated to tracking down every last swarm vessel. Captain Zhang stood on the bridge of the Retribution, now serving as the flagship for the pursuit operations, watching as her tactical team analyzed the latest intelligence reports. "Captain," Lieutenant Morrison called from the sensor station, "long-range probes have located another swarm nest, approximately 600 vessels, currently stripping the fourth planet in the Zerion system." Zhang studied the tactical display with the cold precision that had made her one of humanity's most effective commanders. The swarm's pattern had become clear over the past weeks. They were retreating toward the galactic rim, destroying everything in their path as they fled. It was scorched earth tactics on an interstellar scale. Distance to target? 47 light-years, Captain. The nest appears to be consuming the planet's organic matter to fuel reproduction. Intelligence estimates they're creating approximately 50 new vessels per day. Admiral Rodriguez's voice crackled over the communication system from his position aboard the Vengeance, currently leading a separate hunter group in the Andorian sector. "Captain Zhang, you're authorized to pursue and destroy. Don't let them complete their breeding cycle." The pursuit had revealed something disturbing about the swarm. They weren't just a conquering force. They were a plague. Every world they consumed was converted into more ships, more weapons, more death. The collective had been fighting a losing battle not just because they were peaceful, but because they fundamentally misunderstood what they were facing. "Sir," came the voice of Dr. Elena Vasquez, the xenobiologist who had been studying captured swarm technology. "I need to brief you on our latest findings." Zhang turned to the scientist, noting the troubled expression on her face. "What have you learned, Doctor?" "The swarm isn't just consuming planets for resources, Captain. They're learning. Every species they encounter, every technology they absorb, gets incorporated into their biological matrix. The vessels we're tracking now are more advanced than the ones we fought at Sanctuary." This revelation sent a chill through the bridge crew. The implications were staggering. If the swarm continued their expansion unchecked, they wouldn't just destroy civilizations. They would become stronger with each conquest. "How much stronger?" Zhang asked. "Based on our analysis, they've absorbed technology from at least 12 different species over the past century. Their latest ships show adaptive shielding that responds to our weapons. They're evolving, Captain." Zhang felt the familiar cold focus that had earned her the nickname, the Shark, settle over her mind. "Then we need to evolve faster." The human fleet's response to this challenge would have impressed military historians from Earth's bloody past. Instead of retreating or changing tactics, they accelerated their campaign. Research teams aboard every ship worked around the clock, analyzing captured swarm technology and developing countermeasures. But it was the partnership with the collective that truly transformed the conflict. Ambassador Zethkar, now serving as liaison aboard the Retribution, watched in amazement as human engineers took collective technology and weaponized it in ways its creators had never imagined. "Your healing beam technology," explained Commander Sarah Park to a group of collective scientists. "It repairs damaged tissue by reconstructing molecular bonds, correct?" The lead collective scientist, a delicate crystalline being named Searth, nodded uncertainly. "Yes, but it is designed to preserve life, not destroy it." Park smiled with the kind of expression that had made enemies of humanity reconsider their life choices. "What if we reverse the polarity? Instead of reconstructing molecular bonds, we make them fall apart." The resulting weapon, dubbed the decay beam by human technicians, proved devastatingly effective against swarm bioships. What had been designed to heal became a weapon that caused enemy vessels to literally dissolve at the molecular level. The Battle of Zerion demonstrated the evolution of human collective cooperation. The human fleet approached the swarm nest with a tactical sophistication that built on weeks of experience. Instead of the frontal assault that had worked at Sanctuary, They implemented a strategy that would have made Sun Tzu proud. Phase 1 initiated, reported Admiral Rodriguez as his group emerged from hyperspace on the far side of the system. The swarm vessels immediately moved to intercept, their upgraded technology evident in their improved coordination and defensive capabilities. But the humans had evolved as well. Instead of engaging directly, Rodriguez's group began a fighting retreat, drawing the swarm away from their breeding planet. It was a classic human tactic. Make the enemy come to you, then spring the trap. Captain Zhang's group struck while the swarm was pursuing Rodriguez. Emerging from hyperspace at close range to the breeding planet, they found it defended by only a skeleton force. The planet itself was a nightmare of biological engineering, its surface covered in massive organic factories producing new swarm vessels. Collective vessels, you're cleared to begin planetary bombardment with the new decay weapons, Zhang ordered. Human vessels will provide cover and target any newly emerged ships. The sight of collective vessels unleashing weapons of mass destruction would have been unthinkable weeks ago, but the partnership with humanity had shown them that sometimes, preservation of life required the destruction of those who would extinguish it. The battle for Xerion lasted 36 hours. When it ended, the swarm had lost not just 600 vessels but their entire breeding facility. For the first time since the war began, the swarm was actually getting weaker instead of stronger. But the true measure of humanity's impact came in the aftermath. As the combined fleet regrouped, Captain Zhang received a priority transmission from Earth. The message was from Director Morrison of the Deep Space Communication Array, and it carried news that would change the war's scope forever. Captain Zhang, we've intercepted communications from 17 different star systems. Word of humanity's intervention has spread throughout this galactic sector. 7 species have formally requested military assistance against various swarm elements. 4 others are asking for training in human combat doctrine. Zhang shared the message with Admiral Rodriguez and Ambassador Zethkar during their daily strategy conference. The implications were staggering. Admiral, Zethkar said slowly, I believe your species has accomplished something unprecedented. You've given the galaxy hope. Rodriguez nodded grimly. And responsibility. If we're successful here, every species threatened by the swarm will expect us to help them too. It was Captain Zhang who voiced what they were all thinking. Then we'd better make sure we're ready for that challenge. The response from Earth exceeded even the most optimistic projections. Production facilities that had been working at wartime capacity doubled their output again. The lunar shipyards launched new vessels every day. Mars began construction of a massive training facility for alien personnel who wanted to learn human military doctrine. But the most significant development came from an unexpected source. The collective, inspired by their partnership with humanity, began to transform their entire civilization. Their advanced technology, combined with newfound human tactical knowledge, produced weapons and defenses that surpassed anything either species could have created alone. The final phase of the swarm campaign began 3 months after the first human ships had arrived in collective space. The combined human collective fleet now numbered over 800 vessels and included representatives from 6 different species. The swarm, reduced to scattered clusters hiding in the dark spaces between stars, faced an enemy unlike anything in their evolutionary history. The last battle took place in a nameless system on the galactic rim. The remaining swarm forces, approximately 2,000 vessels, had gathered around a rogue planet to make their final stand. They had learned much from their encounters with humanity, incorporating captured technology and adapting their tactics. But they still didn't understand the most fundamental aspect of human nature. Humans don't just fight to win, they fight to make sure their enemies can never threaten anyone again. All ships, Admiral Rodriguez's voice carried across the fleet communication system. This ends here. For every world they burned, every species they destroyed, every life they ended, this ends here. The battle was fierce but brief. The swarm fought with the desperation of a species facing extinction, using every trick they had learned. But they faced an enemy that had spent millennia perfecting warfare, now supported by the most advanced peaceful technology in the galaxy. When it was over, Captain Zhang stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as the last swarm vessel broke apart under concentrated fire. Around her, her crew, human and alien alike, worked with the quiet professionalism of people who had done something that would echo through galactic history. "Captain," Lieutenant Morrison reported, "long-range sensors show no remaining swarm signatures in this sector of the galaxy." Zhang nodded slowly. "Signal the fleet." 6 months later, Earth hosted the first Galactic Defense Conference. Representatives from 23 species gathered to discuss the formation of a mutual defense alliance. The collective served as primary mediators, their peaceful nature making them ideal diplomats. Humanity provided the military backbone and tactical expertise. Admiral Rodriguez, now bearing the title of Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense Forces, stood before the assembled delegates and delivered the closing address. 6 months ago, humanity received a call for help from people we had never met. We responded because that's who we are. Today, we stand together as proof that the galaxy doesn't have to be a dark place, where the strong prey on the weak. Together, we can build something better. End quote. Captain Zhang, now commanding the first mixed-species deep patrol fleet, watched the ceremony from her ship in orbit. Her mission was to patrol the galactic rim, ensuring that no threat like the swarm could ever again catch the galaxy unprepared. As she looked out at the stars, she reflected on how much had changed. Humanity had set out to answer a distress call and ended up reshaping galactic civilization. They had proven that sometimes, the best way to ensure peace was to be exceptionally good at war. The galaxy was a safer place now, and in the depths of space, human ships continued their eternal patrol, carrying a simple message to anyone who might threaten innocent life. Earth's children were watching, and they would not tolerate bullies.